So welcome to this short video that I'm going to produce today, just looking at an exam paper. So we're going to look at the Health and Social Care Unit 1 paper on human lifespan development from January 2021. So this is the most recent exam paper that's been produced by the series. Now, as it stands at time of recording, there isn't a mark scheme available for this paper, and it hasn't been made available online yet. So what I will be doing is I'll be talking through the paper. It's going to be a bit of a paper review and discussion about what could be included in each question. As I say, the mark scheme hasn't been released, so obviously it's not possible to double check my answers, but I may do a follow-up video in the future, which I will do this. So I'll take a look at the answers that I produced today, or the ideas I come up today, and compare them against the mark scheme. What is also worth noting is obviously I'm going to release this today, so the date today is the 5th of March. As it stands, obviously the exam results for this series haven't been released yet, so you may have sat this paper in January and you're waiting on your results to come out. Now, obviously, if that's the case, obviously feel free to watch this and maybe see if you've got some ideas, but don't panic. If I say something or I come up with an idea and you may not have done that in your paper, don't worry about that. As I say, it's going to be marked and obviously it's being judged, and examiners are coming up with ideas for this. So obviously I'm just coming up with some ideas. I'm talking about the paper. In particular, I want to talk about some of the questions which do seem to be common in this exam. So let's take a look at the paper. And as I say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to produce some notes on the side of the screen. So I'm just going to move this over here. So our first question, which does seem to be common across most of these exam papers, particularly for Unit 1 in recent years, begins with graph data analysis. So we're looking at a graph based on some facts, and we're trying to determine what is happening and what it is showing us. So the first question is looking at Laura. Laura's 18 years old and has recently moved to London to study early years for education at university. Laura's worried that she'll miss her family, and the study is all about loneliness. So the first question says, using the data from the graphs, identify the age group with the highest number of people who report that they are lonely some of the time. So if we look at the graph, we can see we're looking for some of the time, which is the top or second band, and we can see that people aged 16 to 24 report that. So the first answer would be 16 to 24 is the group who have the highest proportion who report they're lonely some of the time. The second question, the age group with the highest number of people who report they are never lonely. So again, never lonely is the 65 to 74 range group. I'm going to make this a bit bigger as well so we can see that on the screen. Lovely. So there are our first two answers. So as I say, with these questions, it is really just a case of identifying the facts and jotting those down. So hopefully no major troubles with these questions. Now, the second question is about predictable and unpredictable life events. Now, life events is a very common theme. I was looking back through the previous papers, and I was able to find that questions on life events, predictable and unpredictable, came up in both January and June papers of 2020. So the last two exam papers, and they also came up in both exam papers in 2018, so the June and July. So a very common question. It does seem to have been on papers recently. So predictable and unpredictable life events. The main difference is a predictable life event is an event likely to occur / take place and can be prepared for. Oh, this obviously I'm going to put some typos as I'm typing. Prepared for. So the questions ask us to describe one predictable and one unpredictable life event. So, for example, a predictable life event would be starting school. As all children have to do this around 5 years of age. But other life events you could pick, some of the other ones I thought about was leaving home is often a common. Most people will leave home in early adulthood, if not earlier. And retirement is a predictable life event. Everyone will generally retire from employment. An unpredictable life event, so I'm going to just a predictable life event is likely to occur. So then if I go with this one, so I can put an unpredictable life event is less likely to occur, and sorry, not less likely to occur, can, or life event can occur without warning. For example, an unpredictable life event might be something like redundancy, meaning that this cannot be planned for. It might be other ones I've got on my list. I talked about illness, so sudden illness being onset, death of a family member or relative that's unexpected. So a predictable event is something that you know is going to happen and you can prepare for it, or it's likely to happen in someone's lifetime. An unpredictable life event is something that occurs without warning, without preparation, or very little warning or preparation. There are some events which kind of can cross it. So pregnancy is deemed to be unpredictable. It's likely that most people will experience, or most women, sorry, will experience pregnancy in their lifetime. It's often planned for, but again, there are events where it's an unpredictable, it's unplanned, it's unexpected, and it occurs without warning. So some of these could be used in different ways as long as you justify it. Okay, question C for this. So we're still talking about Laura. We're still talking about Laura, who's obviously gone to university and is feeling or worried about feeling lonely. So we've got 2 4-mark questions here for her. So Laura shares a flat with 3 other students at university. They're sharing bills and responsibilities associated with living independently. And it says, describe how living away from home will have an impact on Laura's independence. Now, obviously, the question here is about independence and obviously the effect of independence on Laura. The second question here about self-concept, I'm going to talk about in a second because it builds on from this. But self-concept, again, is a common theme and has come up a number of times. So the questions about an individual self-concept or factors affecting self-concept have come up in the sample paper in 2017, both papers of 2018, and it also came up in the 2020 paper. I think it was the January 2020 paper. So again, a few times self-concept has appeared in recent exam papers. So the first question here, describe how living away will affect Laura's independence. So one of the things about living away, obviously being independent, we could think about how independence, also Laura will have responsibilities for managing her own time / workloads, and this could improve her self-esteem. So again, I'm sort of, it sort of talks about how it affects her independence. So again, it's a hard one to think, but I've sort of thought about the idea that the fact that she has more responsibilities for managing her own time, obviously her workload, and then I also put Laura will also have to deal with problems or issues that arise from living in a shared house, such dealing with this could help with her resilience or emotional resilience. So again, I would have to look at the mark scheme. This one, I was a little unsure where to go with this, so I've kind of come up with a rough. My understanding would be sort of things to how she's independent, but as I say, it might be asking for a specific list. She's more independent because she has to buy her own food, do her own washing, clean the house, and obviously, you know, organize her time. So as I say, I will have to double check this one. I'm going to pop it in red because this is when we look at the mark scheme. This is one that I'm a little unsure about, particularly what I've done with that answer. Now, the second question, which is about Laura's self-concept, I think it's probably a little bit easier because, again, it says outline the impact of attending university on Laura's self-concept. So I thought, obviously, going to university is going to have a positive impact. So university will have a positive impact on her self-concept. And the reason for this is Laura will feel she has achieved a goal by completing a degree. It might also be that Laura will take part in new activities or experiences, adding to her sense of self and obviously her understanding of who she is. So again, actually, I'll put that here. So this is what, again, it's a question I will have a look at the mark scheme, but that's my idea of being with going to university. She's going to feel positive about her achievements by completing a degree. And also the new activities will add to her sense of self and who she is. The next question, the 6th marker here, says Laura is learning many new theories about child development and is finding her course very interesting. So we've got a question on Piaget here. So it says describe Piaget's theories of schemas. Now, this question of schemas is again a very, very common one. This came up in 2020, and was a 6 marker. Actually, the 2020 paper, I think it was the January 2020 paper about schemas, it was almost the exact same question. Describe Piaget's theories of schema. In 2018, there was another 6 mark question about schemas, which again was almost identical. So this does seem to be a common question that does come up frequently in this paper, and it's all about schemas. So with schemas, it says describe the theories of schemas. So we just need to talk about what they are. So schemas is all about the assimilation of new information and ideas. That's what schemas is all about, and assimilation is one of the ideas of it. So obviously it leads to children having ideas. So what we can do with is that children have a understanding or have an understanding of the world based on experiences. This is equilibrium. The children start off with equilibrium, where their experiences, what they understand about the world, matches their ideas. So obviously what we can put here is schema, or experiences match schema. Obviously, schema is their understanding of the world. New information that challenges the existing schema is called a disequilibrium. So new information appears and it disrupts it. For example, a red car challenges existing schema of cars being blue. So again, not a very good example, but the idea that children have an experience that all cars are blue, they see a red car, it blows their mind, and that causes disequilibrium. And then children will accommodate or accommodate the new information. So I'm going to put accommodation because that's the process. The new information, again, excuse the typos, information, and create a new schema. Again, that's the process that we're looking at here. So describe Piaget's theory of schemas, and this is how children learn. So we've got assimilation of new information, which is obviously their understanding of ideas that children have. Children have an understanding, or children understand the world based on experiences. This is equilibrium, and experiences match the schema. New information that challenges existing schemas is called disequilibrium. A red car challenges existing schema of cars being blue. Children will accommodate new information, and then this will create a new schema. So this is the process that Piaget talked about. As I say, I'll double check the mark scheme when it's released, but that's what I pulled together for this. This is what I would put, particularly because it's a 6 marker. We're just outlining what the schema process is. Okay, and then the question follows on looking at Piaget again. So this is all about cognitive development. Now, cognitive development, again, another popular topic in this paper. It's come up in 2017 and 2018. It is often a 10 marker as well. So it has been 10 markers, very similar to this question. And again, this question is evaluate the model of cognitive development. Now, Piaget's cognitive development model is that we go through the stages. Imagine the steps. So we have the sensory, motor, I've got to spell sensory, motor stage, which is 0 to 2. And that's obviously all about object permanence. Again, please excuse all my typos here. We then move into the pre-operational stage, which is 2 to 7. We then move into the concrete operational stage, is 7 to 11. And during this point, obviously at the age of 7, children develop the conservation and egocentrism skills. So obviously for Piaget, at the age of 7, children develop conservation, which is about the idea that fluids and objects can change in size and mass and shape, but they remain equal. And egocentrism is all about understanding other people's emotions, feelings, and seeing the world from someone else's point of view. And then finally, we have the formal operational stage, which is obviously all about it's almost the final then. It's all about rational thinking, and kind of understanding. It's almost like logical thinking processes. So these are the points that Piaget is making. This is his cognitive development stages, the stages you go through, and the skills that develop at each point. Now, obviously, Piaget, we're evaluating this theory. We need to say what's good and what's bad about it. So one strength, I'm going to put a little happy face, is that this model has guided and directed education for a number of years. So it's become almost established that children go through these stages. That's one good thing. So if we're evaluating his model, there is a merit to it. It is being used within education, and he did conduct studies to observe this. So again, we can always put his theory is based on studies of children. So that's one other strength. However, we go with the weaknesses, things a bit problematic. The sample was very small. So he did very small studies. It wasn't a very wide range of children. He's also criticised for underestimating children's abilities, and some children can learn these skills before age 7. And it also kind of develops on this, that particularly what's really important is that it's almost education and social interaction are key. We could also criticize his theory for another one, is that some children do not develop these skills due to sort of learning disabilities or mental health. So, for example, particularly about the egoistic and understanding emotions, if you think about children who maybe have autism, you know, they find it very, very difficult to read emotions and understand what people are thinking or feeling or see from someone else's point of view. So there are criticisms of his theory. And as I say, because it's an evaluation question, we might want to just outline a little bit about what he says. So the sensory motor, we're exploring the world with our senses: taste, touch, smell, sound, and then we move into pre-operational, where we're starting to interact with other people. We're starting to explore beyond their kind of very small understanding of the world. Then we move into concrete operational and informal operational. And then again, the strengths is that it's guided education. It is based on studies of children. However, small sample, underestimates abilities, and doesn't consider learning disabilities within his work. So again, some pros and cons that you could say about Piaget. Right, so that's our first 10 marker out of the way. So let's move on to the next set of questions. Now, again, we're talking about Laura. Again, Laura seems to be the main focus of this paper. And now we are moving on to life stages. Now, life stages are very, very common questions. Looking through the past papers, life stages, or a question about life stages, identifying a life stage, does seem to come up very frequently. It does seem to be a common theme for exam papers. So this one here says Laura has completed her studies and now working in a primary school. She's teaching a group of children who are in early childhood. So we know early childhood is that age range of 3 to 8. The next question says describe 2 life stages that children will pass through, including the age ranges. So the next 2 life stages after early childhood is you enter adolescence, which takes place between the ages of 9 to 18. So that's our adolescence stage. So from the point of 9 to 18, you're seen as an adolescent. Following on from early adolescence, you enter early adulthood, which is obviously the age range of 19 to 45. So these are the next 2 age ranges for these children. Now, I've got a little niggle of self-doubt there, so I'm just going to double check that I'm on the right lines here. So textbook handily doesn't have a list of them, so I will double check those, but I'm pretty confident in my answers there. So those are the first 2 age ranges. Now, next one says describe how play can promote intellectual development. So again, this is a little bit of a throwback to Piaget in some respects, because Piaget did stages of play as part of his study. So what we need to think about is how play can lead to intellectual development. Now, the ideas that came to mind when I was thinking about this question, some of the ideas I would potentially put would be that play can encourage communication and discussion among children. This will develop their language skills. So again, intellectual development covers thinking, reasoning, language. So that's our first one. So play encourages communication, discussion. Children will learn thinking and language skills. What I also would put is that play can include taking on roles and this can help develop children's ability to see other people's point of view, which is egocentrism. So again, another Piaget theory in terms of cognitive development coming through play and the stages of play. The other bit I thought about was the play involves rules and goals, so children can learn sort of the routines and skills needed to play games together. So again, the idea being that, you know, games involve rules and regulations, and children learn the roles, learn the rules, and again, that could be helpful for their intellectual development. So again, it's almost part of their thinking skills, their reasoning skills, their logic skills. So again, you don't have to put all of it. I think the first two, language and then role playing, helps people see other points of views. That's egocentrism and language. They would probably be the two I put. Learning rules, goals, I think could put in there, but I'd need to maybe develop that a bit. So our next question. Now, this question, as is another popular one within the exam papers, is all about puberty, and it's asking us to think about. Let's move page down. There we go. Hormones are a major factor in determining physical development during puberty. So again, questions on puberty have come up in 2017, 2019. They've been on the sample paper. The exam paper does like to ask questions about puberty, particularly either asking you to think about the primary and secondary sexual characteristics or the effect puberty has on the body. So if we're looking at this question, describe the role of hormones in sexual maturity, we can talk about the main hormones there. So for boys, obviously the main hormone is testosterone. Testosterone, got to spell it properly, which is produced by the testes. And testosterone, as the hormone, it leads to the growth of the penis and development of secondary characteristics such as chest hair and muscle growth. So that's obviously, again, we're thinking about physical development. So we've got the hormone identified, testosterone, where it's produced, it's led to the growth of the penis and development of secondary characteristics. For girls, again, we're thinking about physical development. So the hormones for girls are estrogen. I can't remember how to spell it. Estrogen and progesterone. So they're the main hormones for girls. They're produced by the ovaries. Now, again, if we're thinking about physical development, again, my sort of the idea I've got in head is to talk about how it leads to menstruation and also regulates the menstrual cycles. But obviously with physical development, so I'm going to change my answer. So I'm going to put obviously these physical changes that occur obviously might be lengthening of the vagina for girls and secondary development or secondary characteristics such as breast development. So again, my initial thought was to go talk about the menstruation cycle beginning and also how these hormones regulate menstruation. But because we're focusing on the physical, I'm just gonna talk about the physical changes just to be safe. But there we go. So boys, testosterone, testes, penis, and chest hair or chest muscle growth. That's a physical development. For girls, estrogen, progesterone. I'm gonna put a capital on estrogen. Produced by the ovaries, and it lengthens the vagina and leads to secondary characteristics like breast development. So there we have our physical characteristics identified. Now we move on to our next 10 marker. Now we're back to Laura. Laura seems to be again our key figure in this paper. So it says evaluate the impact of living in a low-income household on children's development. So, Laura works in a school with a high area of economic deprivation. So economic deprivation, again, it's part of section B in the course. It again is a very popular topic. It's appeared in both exam papers in 2018. It's appeared in both papers from 2019, but this is the first time, or the most recent example. So a bit of a gap for economic deprivation. Now, economic impact, so low income, obviously we're thinking about children's development. We're going to go with pies. So physical, intellectual, emotional, social. Now, again, I'm not going to cover all of them explicitly. We're evaluating here, but in terms of physical development, or actually I'll put it up. Whoa, going all over the place. Physical, you might want to think about diets. So obviously low income equals poor diets. That and affects physical growth of children's bodies. So that's one point that we could think about. What I also sort of thought about from watching documentaries and stuff, my class is obviously economically, diet is poor, obviously housing conditions. So more likely to experience things like cold, damp, and mold. So again, these can have impacts on health. Obviously, particularly conditions like asthma are more common in children from low-income backgrounds or living in poor housing conditions. And otherwise, that's a kind of a the only other one I thought about, maybe overcrowding, which can spread illness. So illness can spread more quickly in an overcrowded home. So these would be my physical factors, how low income can affect children's development. Intellectually, we might think about lack of resources to develop thinking and reasoning skills in children. So again, thinking about those Piaget cognitive development points. This is, again, I teach sociology as one of my other subjects that I deliver. So again, a lot of this overlaps with material factors from what I teach in sociology. So I would, if I was doing this, would have thrown in sort of some people like Douglas, so sociological thinkers who talk about these issues. Now, if you do sociology, you could do that. I don't think there's anything to say you couldn't bring in a theorist or a thinker from a different topic area, as long as it's relevant. So again, same if you do psychology, if you're doing biology, you might want to bring in these thinkers, but obviously just not go too overboard with them. Emotional development. Again, you might think about the idea of less money means less choice or opportunities to take part in activities, and this could lead to less independence. Again, I'm thinking about that question earlier about Laura, about how she was independent, how that was good for her self-concept. So obviously self-concept / self-esteem. Obviously, what I'm also going to put in a side note is bullying. So children from low-income backgrounds are more likely to experience bullying, and as a result, that could affect their self-esteem, self-interest. Just jumping back to physical, I've just had another thought. Obviously, is stress, and obviously the physical impact of stress. So in terms of illness, so you could think about the stress diaphysis model, or you could think about the Holmes-Ray social readjustment scale. Again, as examples of how stress can affect children. And then socially, just social relationships. see are lower because they can't take part in activities. I realise I've kind of overlapped my emotional and social points, but also what you can maybe think about is parents' relationships. Obviously, maybe working more. So these are some of the ways, obviously, we're thinking about the impact of a low income on children's development. Now, obviously, we do want to think about some of the positives that could come from this. So, obviously, again, maybe thinking about the idea that children are, obviously, they have higher levels. Obviously, they learn skills to look after or help around the home. One of the, again, it came up in an exam paper a few years ago, sort of talk about the impact of, poverty was that, less likely to overeat and have money for takeaways. Now, again, I'm skeptical of that, but again, it wasn't an exam paper. It was a mark scheme point a few years ago that was, a benefit of having no money is that you're not going to spend it on takeaways, and then therefore you're going to be slightly healthier, which is again is a slightly odd point. Again, lack of resources, so maybe children learn skills, less choice, could affect independence, self-esteem, bullying. Again, it might mean that children form better or closer relationships with siblings. Could be something to think about. Parents' relationships may be stronger because obviously it's the most important thing in their life. Social relationships are lower, again, because lack of money for activities, but may have closer friendships. So maybe they can't do stuff, but they make more time to spend time with friends. Again, it's sort of clutching at scores a bit. I would have to look at the mark scheme again for this question, but these were some of the points I had off the top of my head. As always with a 10 mark, you want to try and get a theory in there. So you'll see the stress diaphysis model, the Holmes-Rays scale. Obviously, I've tried to cover pies, so physical, intellectual, emotional, and social development in my answer, and there are some pros and some cons. A question like this is generally more weaknesses, but there are some benefits I've tried to include to balance it out, as the evaluation question says. Right, next question we have on this topic is Gesell. Now, Gesell's theory was all about maturation and the idea that obviously children develop and follow a clear pattern. Now, Gesell hasn't really appeared on the exam papers. This is obviously looking through all the past papers I had. This is the first question I've seen on Gesell for some time. And actually, I think it's the only question I can find on Gesell and maturation theory. So it's obviously one that you may not have seen before, but it's worth looking at. So it says that the children Laura teaches have a range of reading, writing, and mathematical abilities. And it says, to what extent does Gesell's maturation theory explain development? Now, Gesell's whole argument was about how children's development was biologically determined. So essentially, what he said is that children's growth, children's development, and acquisition of skills was a biological process. It was all pre-programmed in children, and what he said was that children follow the same developmental patterns and processes. So this was his key argument for this debate, and it all happened in the same order. So one of the things about Gesell was that he observed children slash their behaviors, and he determined average norms of development, which eventually became what we've talked about in the past as developmental milestones. So he essentially created those developmental milestones that you may have talked about at the very beginning of pies and physical development. Now, some of the things that are good, obviously we're evaluating Gessel, and he's talking about intellectual development. So what extent does Gessel's maturation theory explain developmental intellectual development? So obviously some of the things we can talk about is that meeting milestones of obviously object permanence, you know, forming or learning language, forming attachments, and learning skills such as walking, and obviously particularly we're thinking about fine motor skills. So Gessel's theory does have some connection to the milestones. We observe children, we see have they ticked off these milestones. Now, obviously with this question, we're looking at obviously the idea that, you know, most, as a strength, most health professionals use Gessel's milestones. So that's one thing that he talked about. He observed large numbers of children, looking at what happened to them, how they developed, and making recordings. Obviously, a downside to this was that he didn't consider the impact of cultural differences. And if we kind of think about that criticism we threw about Piaget's cognitive development earlier, he didn't also think about the idea about the effects of education and socialization or social interaction, and how that might change and affect milestones. Doesn't consider biological issues / mental health. So it might be learning disabilities or disabilities in children. And in terms of Piaget, we can think about the idea that these models or these milestones, get that right, are suggestions, but children can develop at different rates / skip. So I mean, from that one, I'm personally thinking about my son when he was sorry, put capital on that. From milestones, one of the big milestones is baby's roll from back to front and front to back. They kind of do it in that order, and my son didn't do that. He didn't do the rolling from his front onto his back. He just, but he did his back to front before anything else. So babies do skip some steps. As I say, I try to sort of think about the pros and cons of using it, but this is a to what extent theory. So to what extent does Gessel's maturation theory explain intellectual development? So, you know, it is useful because of the milestones idea. He did observe lots of children, so he can help to explain intellectual development. But then there are some of the problems, maybe the ways he doesn't help explain intellectual development. As I say, intellectual development does seem to be a common theme within this paper, particularly, you say, having those questions earlier on Piaget. Right, and then we're almost at the end here with our paper, so we'll move down to the next question. So we're looking at Joy. Now, Joy, if I move these answers down, is looking after her mother. So Laura's mother, Laura's looking after her mother. Joy is 79. Joy has always been fit and healthy, but recently has been finding herself more tired than usual. So we're looking at later adulthood here. Now, later adulthood is, again, another common theme. It's been on the 2017 paper, the 2019 paper, both 2020 papers. So the effects of aging, the impact of later adulthood, again, is a common question. And we've got here describe 2 physical changes that happen to Joy in her current life stage. So some of the physical changes we could think about is stuff like a reduction in height, and that's due to spinal disc compression. Obviously, that's one change that happens in later adulthood. We could talk about skin losing its elasticity. Again, that's terrible spelling of the word elasticity. I want to say, obviously, it's the fancy way of saying wrinkles. So elasticity. There we go. So causing wrinkling of the skin. Hair loses its color pigments, causing the hair to grey. And and also we can maybe put thinning of the hair also occurs. There are lots of other physical factors you could talk about. So you could talk about like loss of senses, as the sense organs lose their sensitivity and signals take longer to travel to the brain. You could talk about loss of balance as the fluid within the inner ear begins to crystallize. So older people in later adulthood have less or slower reaction times or a loss of balance. But again, 2 physical changes, any 2 that you can come up with, would work here. Now we've got a next 6 marker, all about Joy. Now we know Joy's in later adulthood. She says she's becoming increasingly forgetful, and Laura's worried. To what extent is memory loss and reduced cognitive ability inevitable in later adulthood? So again, we are thinking about the effects of aging, and also, is it likely, is it inevitable? So again, arguments that would agree with this. So things we can say is that people in later adulthood are more prone to conditions as Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's. So these conditions cause let's get the spelling right, Alzheimer's, which can cause memory loss, reduced cognitive ability, so CA level, cognitive ability. We could combine this with obviously motor neurons or neurons in the brain. Are less responsive and can cause delayed reactions and memory loss. We could even, if we wanted to sort of go a little step further, is think about the idea of older people retire from work and activities, so losing mental stimulation, which can increase the decline of cognitive abilities. So again, we've got, obviously we're saying to what extent is this normal and inevitable. So what we've got here are some arguments: Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, motor neurons or neurons are less responsive, and retirement. But obviously to go against this, we can think about how maintaining a healthy diet and physical exercise can delay and reduce the effects of aging. Medication is also available to reduce the effects of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Again, never going to fully cure the conditions, but medication can help manage the condition. So again, reducing, maintaining, there we go, a healthy diet, exercise, there we go. So again, there are things that can alleviate the pressures. I suppose also remaining active can also remaining active and engaging in mentally challenging tasks can keep the brain active. So again, to this, what extent is moving into later adulthood going to cause a decline in mental ability? So we can say, you know, yes, it is inevitable because of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, any one of these. However, it isn't inevitable because you can challenge it with these points here. Right, nearly there with our last two questions now, the last two 10 markers of the paper. Now, this next question was a surprise when my students told me about it and when I was looking at it. It's quite a challenging question, particularly because the level of depth we look at this in health and social care is quite small. So this is a question that has appeared on the 2018 paper in the past. It's almost this exact same question, the effects of an aging population. So very, very, it's a question that's not been on the paper much and has only appeared once before in 2018, but I thought we'd look at this one. So this is quite a tricky question. There's 61% of increase in the number of over 65s in the UK by 2032. Britain's over 65s already outnumber its under 16s. And it says, to what extent could a UK society be impacted negatively by increasing population of people aged 65 and over? Now, as I say, if you've done geography, if you do sociology, if you looked at anything to do with demographics, you'll probably have some ideas for this. As I say, it's not something that comes up really much in the health topic, particularly the impact of aging populations on society. So again, I'm pulling on my sociology. So some of the ideas I have here is that currently 2/5, or I suppose in this case 40% of the NHS budget is spent on care for the for those over 65. It is estimated to rise to 3/5. So obviously, again, I'm talking. This is what it means is that's 40%, and then 3/5 would be, if I've got my maths right, would be 60%. So again, that would see a big increase in NHS spending. Obviously, increased demand for pensions would impact society. So this would result in increased age of retirement, which we have seen in the last few years. I think the retirement age has been pushed to 68, and it was previously 65 for, I think, 65 for men and 60 for women. So retirement ages have gone up because there's been bigger demand on pensions. This will also increase taxation on workers to cover costs. So working populations will have to pay more in taxes. So taxation will increase, pension ages will increase. or increased retirement age, and pension amounts will decrease. And also what we might also see is obviously the impact of this is less demand for education and youth services, as it mentions that, you know, over 65s outnumber under 16s, so this could lead to closure of schools or youth-based activities if there's less demand. We also see this process, one of the other things that's come about with an aging population is increased demand or care being placed on families to care for their elderly relatives, and this is what's creating something called sandwich carers. So it's often children, or adults who are caring for their relatives or their older parents, while simultaneously trying to care for their own young children. So they're sandwiched between two care responsibilities. So again, to what extent could the UK be impacted negatively by increasing population? So that's all the kind of the problems that come about from an aging population. As I say, this is stuff that I've covered in sociology, so I'm using my sociology knowledge rather than anything from health. However, the benefits of it is that obviously parents or grandparents are more active in children's lives and provide childcare for working parents, so that's reducing the cost of that. It also encourages or allows, I'm going to put that here as an extension, allows more women to return to work following having children, and that's obviously leading to increased gender again, another benefit, another good thing that comes about from these grandparents stepping up and obviously having an impact. We could also think about how older people are important for the economy. So obviously, so again, another. I remember learning this when I did geography. This was the idea about the grey pound. So there is a whole section of the economy centered around older people spending, and obviously contributing back into the economy. So there are benefits. There are some benefits that come from an aging population. As I say, quite a tricky question because this isn't specifically health and social care. My understanding, my answers for this came from teaching sociology. So again, some ideas you could throw in here. I would always try and say throw a theory in to support your points. And I realise, obviously, I've just missed a massive opportunity to include a theory, which would be Haverhurst and activity theory. The older people are more active in later adulthood. So again, always try and include a theory in your answers, and I nearly missed the opportunity to do so. Okay, and then that, I think we have one question left on our paper. So this is our last question. If I just skim down and double check, yes, it is, which is about the well-being of Laura's health for caring for Joy. Now, questions on health and well-being are very common in the exam paper. Looking through the past few papers, I found questions about health and well-being in 2019, 2018, both papers in 2019, a sample paper, a 2020 paper. So it is a common question, and it's always about different contexts. You know, the impact on a certain character's health and well-being because of this. So obviously we're thinking about the impact of well-being for Laura by looking after her mum. So we can talk about the physical impact, you know, stress of caring for mum, Obviously, that could be linked to, as we mentioned, like theory-wise stress, diaphysis, or the Holmes-Ray social readjustment scale. So again, we can connect a theory in doing so. So stress for caring for mum and managing her work. That could be obviously causing her to be tired, and can obviously have an impact on her job and affect her performance. So this could then also lead on to, again, I'm kind of spitballing over ideas here, to her self concept / self esteem. Again, I'm getting sort of slightly vibes of the coursework, Unit 5 coursework, talking about Maria's mum, and that Maria is caring for her mum, and that's obviously affecting her ability to be a teacher. So again, just some ideas that are kind of coming off the top of my head here. We can talk about maybe emotional attachments. So it might be good. So positives would be, obviously, Laura feels a stronger connection to her mum by caring for her. But the stress of caring is reducing her resilience to do so. Obviously, again, health and well-being, we could talk about social, obviously less time for social activities and engaging with friends or other relatives. So again, a reduction in social development abilities to take part in activities. So again, you could think about how providing this care could be difficult for Laura because she's losing her time. It could cause stress and anxiety. The attachment to her mum, it might help her feel good about connecting for her mum, building on their relationship. But the caring could cause stress. And then socially, you could think about the less time for social activities, and obviously less time for Laura's health and well-being. So there we have it. So I've gone through the whole paper. So just to kind of come back to that paper, that's the last question there. So that was the January 2021 paper. As I said, right at the very beginning, no mark scheme available. So these ideas I had, how I might answer these questions, what I might try to include, but by no means are these the correct answer, the only answers. And obviously, if you've sat this paper and you're waiting your results, obviously I'm wishing you all the best for getting your results come through. But as I say, don't panic if I've said something here that you don't remember writing, or you feel you've done something differently to me. Just wait and see what your results are like. As I say, the mark schemes are very, very broad, and what I'm talking about here is a very small section of ideas that I would have. So there we have it. So hopefully this has been of some help and some use. If the results and the mark schemes get published, I can always do a follow-up video looking at the answers I've produced here and checking them against the mark scheme. And I might even just do a short summary if I was on the right lines. There was only one question that I'm unsure about, which was the about the responsibilities and how it would affect Laura's self-esteem of independence. So I might double check those, and then I can always follow that up. Otherwise, thanks for watching this video. I hope it is of some help, even if it's just getting an idea of what to expect in exam papers. The best thing to do, my advice, is try and get hold of as many past papers as you can. Look at the types of question, look at what is being asked. As I said, I found there are lots of common themes, lots of styles of question that you can come up frequently. There was no questions on growth, development, or gross and fine motor skills here, but they come up a lot. Almost every other exam paper year seems to have those questions. So my advice, take a look at exam papers, look at as many as you can, and see what themes you can spot. As always, thanks for watching. I hope you've liked this. I hope this has helped. And if you do like it, obviously put a like, subscribe to the channel, maybe even just tell some friends or tell other students you know that I've got these resources here to use. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and hopefully this will help with exams.